Hey there, rulers. Demo73 here, bringing you a feature match between Paul and Dan, showcasing Paul's final attempt at Olivia for now versus Dan rocking out Lucifer with some discard and some reanimate shenanigans using the new cards that we've seen in New World Emerges. Let's go ahead and jump right in. This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for product, and FowlLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists, as well as our guest lecturer members Vite Ramen, King Pearl Shine, and Mognite. Class is in session. So as we get into this, rulers, I do just want to let you know that we are only going to be showing a couple games of this match. We tried to get a good recording in for Game 3, and it just didn't quite work out, but we still wanted to show you what these two decks were doing. So just wanted to give you a heads up as we jump in here to the commentary. So we got Paul on the right with Olivia control, using Terra Thunderfish and some other cool new cards that we've seen from other control decks recently, and Dan Roland on the left playing Lucifer Discard, making use of some of the also good reanimate effects as well, with like Spirit of Decay, bringing back Harvesting Season into rune decks, those kinds of things in a way that is make your opponent have no hand. It'll be interesting to see how this matchup plays out. Olivia does have quite a bit of card draw, especially being able to get a free dolly right out the gate, and the question becomes, can Dan find the pressure to get through that even after discarding Paul's hand? So Paul just calling stone and passing, go to Dan, he gets a first stone here. It is a Black Silence, and then we see a old card, Tears of the Fallen, come back in from the rune deck, forcing Paul to randomly discard a card from his hand. I think, Paul, you see there's the Lorite there. Dan starts to go grab a card, but it needs to be random. So Paul's going to shuffle up his hand really quick. Thunder Emperor's Strike has now gone to grave. We're going to see a Look of Corruption come down as well to kind of peek at more of what that hand is. In response, we're going to see that God Art come down, which is going to give us a Dolly. Dolly's probably going to produce us some will off of this, I imagine. We might see something come down like a Fiola or something to be able to mess with this Look of Corruption. And yep, there it is. There is the Fiola here coming down. So this is actually pretty relevant because it's also 9 damage, and a lot of the Lucifer cards and a lot of the Darkness like search cards involve like paying your own life, and so if Paul can put on early aggression, that can kind of potentially limit some of Dan's moves in terms of what he has available. So Viola getting rid of that is advantageous because it keeps his hand full and it gets a card and more bodies onto the field to be able to attack. You see there, he's had Dante Enters the Game of Gods in his hand. That gets significantly less good the lower life total it is. Fiola swinging in for 4 or for 5. Zen says, that's fine, I'll take it. And then we see another 4 come in from Dolly. Takes him down to 31 total. Dan looking like he might want to use his Energized coin here. Does decide to go ahead and use Garion. He starts to kind of go use Garion to hit the Dolly, but we're cycling through here. They catch really quick of like, oh, wait, you can't possibly do that. They go through a weird play line here. Dolly has barrier, so Garion can't target the Dolly at all. So they rewind a little bit here and they're like, oh, wait, yeah, you're right. That doesn't work. And so Dan's just going to have to take the damage. Calling his second stone here, hits another Black Silence. And then we're going to see the Master Rune, it looks like, most likely, of Lucifer. Yep, there it is, Black Rosario. Just forces your opponent to discard or banish 2 Resonators. I imagine there's a world where we see Paul try to get another Resonator in here to save the Dolly. Yeah, we're using Thunder Empress's Strike here to de-randomize off the Dolly. We're going to see a... Oh, it looks like Dan meant to pay for Black Rosario with his will coin as opposed to his 2 stones, so we could have a green stone up, which makes sense. Thunder Empress's Strike is attempting to go get a Resonator, most likely. Good calls here would be to get the Engineer of Ma'at, which could reveal Drywing, which could recover a stone, and then kind of set that up. But I don't know if Paul's playing that in his sideboard, as well as if it really does much against Dan. Olivia is one of the two kind of decks that can easily get Drywing revealed now that the ban list is out, in the form of using Thunder Empress's Strike to grab Engineer, as what we talked about before, and obviously Typhon. So Thunder Empress Strike is attempting to resolve here. It looks like maybe Dan's thinking, do I flash in a Black Witch to stop the search? Do I let it resolve? Don't know if he has a Darkness Witch in hand right now. I think the easy grab here becomes to refill his hand would be something like the Mage of Ma'at, to draw 2 cards, right, and refill his hand and then sacrifice it, kind of keep a more full hand, to keep up the advantage here. We do go grab Fiola, so just to put another body on field. I don't really know exactly, and I'll have to ask some judges, how Fiola targeting the Master Rune would work, because it does say non-resonator spell, and runes technically are a non-resonator spell, so I would wonder how that works. The Lorite's going to come in to stop the Fiola cast, or to stop the Fiola enter effect to try to stop Black Rosario. Black Rosario's then going to resolve, and we're just going to immediately see those 2 Fiolas get shipped. So, burned a lot of resources from Dan to not do a ton of advantage there. It's one of the reasons why I think the Mage of Ma'at might have been better, because Dan would have been at only 1 will going into his turn, and then Mage of Ma'at would have made it so that he wouldn't have been able to play anything, and it would have refilled his hand. Gonna see using 2 de-randomizes to make those both into white, and we're gonna see a Duet of Light without calling stone first. We can get 2 modes. This is pretty good here. We could definitely use it to gain more life, but I think we're probably more likely to use it to bring back Fiola and make our board bigger, just to have, again, more of a presence, more of a threat against what Dan might be running, and more pressure. Yep, here comes the Fiola. It does look like he's going to gain the additional counters on it. So the Fiola will be a 9-10. The Dolly will be an 8-8, giving some good pressure. And then we can call Stone, hitting the Water Moon Fragment, which will let us foresee. Clearly didn't want that card on top. And then we're going to swing in for 8. Probably get chumped by the Lorite. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. But now we're hitting a good point for Dan, because we saw that he has that Athenia in hand. So we're getting to the point where, like, he's going to be able to cast that Athenia. It's very unlikely that Paul with 1 will have a way to stop it, but certainly potentially. And then it'll just recover 3 stones, and then, you know, kind of Dan can put some value in it that way. It at least has a, you know, essentially a free blocker to block the Fiola or trade with the Dolly, which feels pretty good. Yep, as I said, down comes that Athenia. He's going to recover those 3 stones and force Paul to tap down a stone, because he is at rune 1. He's thinking about what he's going to do, potentially what color will he wants to produce there. I believe blue. I'm going to see Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom, one of Dan's favorite cards, and then we're going to move forward. So a key thing to note here, they get into a little bit of a conversation about what happens with killing stone and your life total off of Guardian Dragon of Velsavaria. You can choose to pay 300 life with killing stone, but it'll still come into play tapped because of Guardian Dragon. It's not pay 300 to put this into play recovered. It comes in tapped unless you pay 300, but Guardian Dragon forces it to come into play tapped. So there is no kind of buffer there. It is just going to come into play tapped. Paying 3 here. Seeing a Terra Thunderfish. Terra Thunderfish cannot be canceled, which is not a big deal. J/Fish Resonators gain swiftness, and it is going to be certainly swinging in to try to take things out here. The advantage here is that he can swing and tap everything down, and that's 1,000, and then it's another 900, and then it's another 800, so it's 17. It takes Dan down to 1. And if he can find any way to kind of pump it up at all, it would be lethal. But Dan will just barely survive this. But it is going to absolutely decimate the board and leave him at just 100 life, which is pretty gross, because a lot of his UC's got Dante Enters the Game of Gods there. That becomes suddenly a potentially really dead card, other than just like the life gain mode. It's just not super great. Swings at him for 10. And he's using the mode here to make it not random so that he can rest down Dan's whole board so that in goes the pressure. And then Dan actually deciding to scoop it up there. Doesn't want to live at 100 life. It's just interesting. Makes me wonder if he thought that Fiola was a 6/6. Maybe his math was wrong there. She is a 5/6 base stat. So that was... Paul was 100 damage short there. But you saw Paul did a really good job of kind of controlling the board presence there. And ended it with an uncancelable thing. I think Dan kind of maybe overextended a little bit with that Athenia. It also just felt in general like his hand didn't feel super effective, which was a little bit rough. We're going to slam down a Guardian Dragon of Velsivaria on turn 1 with the coin. It comes into play as a Killing Stone. It's not going to do anything. This, to me, feels really risky. If I was Paul in this situation and he plays that Guardian Dragon, I'd honestly just go for the Dolly right now and bounce it back in his hand and say, like, cool, I get a free turn to do nothing, you know, and then probably play another 2-drop or play a 1-drop here. He might be saving it for something different. I don't know, but it's a pretty heavy early commit to a deck that wants to try to play to the mid to late game with no discard. And to me, that says to Paul, like, you should be probably pressuring, especially since he could, if he had another 1-drop blue card or a 1-drop green card, you know, we could or like even a Black Witch, you could flash that in here at the same turn as well, go to your turn, have 2 will open and apply that 8 pressure damage. So yeah, this is where they're having the conversation about Killing Stone. He doesn't get to pay life for it to come in. And the reason why I think that's probably the better idea here for him to just kind of start pressuring at this point is because if he can pressure, if he can put Resonators on field now, the next turn he can put more Resonators on field and thus diminish the value of something like Black Rosario, which is one of Lucifer's biggest things. Is like, great, I can get rid of 2 things, but if you're playing Black Rosario and everything else, you're probably not playing the board wide neg6, which means that like a wide board then punishes Lucifer a lot heavier than like a couple other things. So yeah, catching that you cannot pay 300 life when bringing in Guardian Dragon, stone off of Guardian Dragon to suddenly just have a free stone off of Guardian Dragon. Tears of the Fallen coming in here. Hits a Fiola. And then a pass, and we do not see the Dolly grab. Thankfully enough, we do have an answer for the Guardian Dragon before recovery, which is Surging Lightning. Doesn't even have to de-randomize it because the only thing on field is the Guardian Dragon, so he can just let it be random between one target so that one thing gets killed. Playing the Space-Time Mage, this feels very odd to me to play this here. We know that Dan is playing Black Rosario, which means, you know, does he feel like he wants to pay 2 will just to answer something Paul paid 2 will for and like kind of net neutral? No, but at the same time, like, it's probably not going to get a lot of value out of it right now. So we'll have to see what happens. Paul being tapped out on Dan's turn is also not super great, especially since he's going to 3 stones because of that Guardian Dragon. So I could imagine we see kind of a blowout turn in the form of like Athenia into a Look of Corruption, into Harvesting Season, into Spirit of Decay. Like, you could see a potential chain of line, a potential line of play here that really puts Paul behind value-wise. Does see the look of corruption here. Duet of Light, setting the stage of Providence, and Black Witch come down. I honestly think that if you're Dan, you grab the light. Yeah, the Duet of Light is the easy grab here, especially considering there's that Fiola in graveyard. You don't want to have Paul do what he did to you last game, which was like get a free Fiola out. It would be a little bit of a high roll for him because he doesn't have access to, I mean, he could get Dolly. Freed from the altar, coming in here to search for any card that he wants, or sorry, a Darkness Resonator, and put it into his hand, and then lose 400 life. He's going to grab Spirit of Decay. And then we're probably going to see, oh yeah, we're seeing a tap out for a Harvesting Season, it looks like. Yep, Harvesting Season coming down here. This also feels like a very strange tap out kind of turn. I guess it's not as greedy because you know for a fact that like Paul doesn't have much in his hand, but you also know that there's going to be a Dolly coming down here, so he's going to get to draw 2 cards. Like if Paul doesn't Dolly here, that feels like a mistake, because he can just use it to draw an extra card and then draw a card for turn. Nope, we're missing it. So Dolly is not coming down right now. Must be really waiting to use it for something a little bit more effective later. And then be 1100 damage. Like you could Dolly at the end of his turn, draw a card for turn, go up from 2 cards to 4 cards in hand, and 11 damage on board, and then just start going in and really closing the gap. Or sorry, I guess I should say widening the gap, not even closing. So we see a Space-Time Mage swing in, takes him down to 29, and then a pass. The question becomes, when does that Spirit of Decay come down? Because Spirit is kind of huge for this matchup. There's not really much that Paul will be able to do if he doesn't have a Lorite to stop the life loss. And even beyond that, the Spirit of Decay then has a lot of token or counters on it, and so it'll be very easily able to keep Paul's board a lot more clear, which puts him, you know, Dan's life total can be lower, but if Paul can't resolve anything to keep it on field, then it's just gonna time out. Does look like we're finally gonna see that Athenia come in here. It does look like her cast is resolved, but in response to her enter, we're going to see some action here from Paul. He's setting the stage of Providence. This makes sense because he knows that Dan's playing Lorites. And so to make sure that like whatever he's about to do isn't going to be canceled, which makes a lot of sense. Still in response to that, we're going to see a Thunder Empress's Strike. What are we doing here with a Thunder Empress's Strike? Fiola doesn't really help us. Grabbing another Resonator doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. We don't want to bounce because it just bounce our own stuff. It is going to go get us a Resonator, it looks like. Oh, and we do get a new Space-Time Mage mod. So this one is going to get to draw him cards because it was played without being played from a hand. Or cast without being played from a hand. So when it resolves, it's going to get him an additional 2 cards. Refill his hand, which is very, very nice. And then Athenia is going to get to resolve her enter effect and recover all the stones and force Paul to be tapped out. But he's already tapped out, so that's not a big deal. Gets to recover those stones, which is kind of gross. And I imagine we're going to see those 2 Resonators get cleared off the board pretty quickly with the Black Rosario. Yep, there it is. So Black Rosario coming in here just to get both of them off the board. Do we see a Goddard in response to save one of them? That doesn't seem necessary to me. I think you just let both of these die. There is also a world where maybe in response to this, we do Dolly's Goddard to put the Athenia back in his hand. so that he can't recast it this turn. Still feels not necessarily relevant. Oh, it does look like that's what we're going to do. So you don't want to bounce your own thing back to your hand, because then you'll have to sacrifice both things on the field anyway. We want to keep that Dali on the field for later. And so we're going to probably bounce the Athenia back to Dan's hand here. Yep, there you go. Back to the hand. Oh, then he did sacrifice the Dali. Left up the Space-Time Mage. That seems incorrect to me. Spirit of Decay comes down here. It's going to be absolutely huge, and it's easily going to be able to kill the Space-Time Mage. This is one of the reasons why I think saving the Dali was better. At least it had barrier at that point, because we knew the Spirit of Decay was in hand because of the Freed from the Altar. Just removing 4 of the counters from there. And now we're sitting on a nice little 9/9 Spirit of Decay that can continue to kill pretty much anything else. Lot of Magic Stone to the Tides for a deck that hasn't been able to keep a Dali on field, which is a little unfortunate. And just a pass from Paul, even up a bunch of will. So if I'm Dan here after calling Stone, I'm probably just going in for combat. Like, I don't even think there's a reason to make any kind of plays yet until we first go into combat. Yep, there we go. Let's do the 900 damage. Force Paul to burn resources first so that you have more will to pay for your other abilities. We see Paul start to make a move here, but ultimately decide, I think, to not. Takes the 9, goes down to 19. Probably going to imagine we see that Athenia recast here, because it does also tap Paul down, which is nice. This is the weirdness here of Paul seems to be responding to her effects by wanting to cast something. Interesting choice here, because he's going to get to recover the stones. I kind of feel like you'd want to just float the will and then move forward. Does use Pulsing Thunder here to try to clear the board. I don't feel like this was necessary to do right now. I feel like you could have just floated blue-white and then floated whatever other colors you want to see if maybe you could bait Dan into playing more out of his hand. Because if he commits more, like, he's going to recover the stones anyway for the Athenia, and if he can commit more to field, then Pulsing Thunder will get you more value. So I think this was a little bit of a snap board wipe as opposed to being patient, because the Athenia is not going to be able to swing this turn anyway, so it doesn't matter if you kill it now versus kill it later. Dan decided to go in on a Dante Enters the Game of Gods, pays the full 15 to draw 3 cards. Is at 5 stones. You see that Black Witch there, so we could easily see, you know, a Black Witch into Black Witch into Black Witch into Pumpkin Witch, and that's 15 damage right there. And that's one of the reasons why, again, like, I think you just kind of wait to do that board wipe until later to see, like, what's the worst thing that can possibly happen, and then you board wipe. We'll have to see if it comes back to bite. Do use one of those 2 blue will to cast a Setting the Stage of Providence, just to cycle into a different card when Dan says pass turn. And then he does have to discard for hand size. You see, discarded a part of True Power there, which is helpful for him to be able to bring back that Spirit of Decay. It seems probably likely that that's where our lethal is going to come in this game. Going into Paul doesn't look super great. staring down the lethal of that Spirit of Decay, kind of just sitting there in the graveyard, already able to do at least 15 with all the cards that we've killed. Probably at least 14. So not a super great position for him to be in health-wise. Does look like we might see a pass here. At the end of the turn, we do see Dan get into that heaven, Witch of the Fallen Kingdom. Dan not choosing to try to grab a Witch from the sideboard, which is, I think, is an interesting choice. Paul saying, let me take advantage of that and go ahead and kill it with Surging Lightning, because its Enter effect still does create a trigger. And so Paul's able to Surging Lightning this card before, before the turn ends. Even if Dan decides not to utilize the Enter effect, it still triggers. Does look like maybe a Garion comes down here. No, ultimately Dan decides to just say, no, you've killed it, well done, and we'll move on. Magic Stone of Knowledge. We are now at 4 unique stones. You saw that there is most likely going to be a search for an Ultra Magic Stone Golem at some point. Like, it seems obvious that he's playing that with this diversity of stones. Demonic Division coming in, using using Olivia's de-randomized to make a Darkness Will, and in comes Witch of the Fallen Kingdom. Witch of the Fallen Kingdom's Enter effect is going in, and Paul's not going to miss this opportunity. Dan choosing not to use that Garion to cancel it, which I think is probably fair. You don't really care about double. I mean, you lose off on the search here, but honestly, you're probably in just a fine spot. We see double Witch of the Fallen Kingdom into Pumpkin Witch to try to give all of them swiftness and flying. Not that it super matters. It's not Paul's turn. He can't attack. And then because we're at 4 stones, we can just slam down an Ultra Magic Stone Golem and kill all of them, which is totally fine for him. Number of cards in grave. Checking to see if after we sacrifice, so part of True Power would stay in grave unless he has another part of True Power in hand, and then Ultra Magic Stone, or the Spirit of Decay will most likely be the lethal here. The problem is also Paul has already burned his randomization for the turn, which is not super great. So part of True Power is going to go on the chase, targeting the Spirit of Decay. Ultimately, though, we're going to see exactly what Paul can do here with 3 will and no choices for randomization left. Targeting the Spirit of Decay to attempt to go for lethal. Do we see something come down here from Paul to stop it? Any kind of cancel, like a Fiola would be really good here because he's tapped down to just 1. Fiola would be like a pretty huge turnaround here. We do see a Thunder Empress's Strike. This is going to be purely random, so Paul is certainly hoping that he can roll the choice to get a Resonator here. Let's see what he gets out of 1 through 6. He's looking for a 1. We need a 1. Hits a 5, that's draw 2 cards, so seems unlikely that we're going to get anything unless he top decks a Lorite. Ultimately, though, does not, and so scoops it up. That is it for these 2 games, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Deck profiles for both of these, this will be up later this week. Sorry we couldn't give you a full match, but we're looking forward to new rulers coming in next week. Until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.